Mini episode 1034 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode number 1032. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here. We have a great mini episode for you today. A football star joining us to talk about his time in the NFL and subsequently his life story. And I think it's very inspirational in what he is doing to try to help out other people. I speak, of course, of Vance Johnson of Three Amigos fame with the Denver Broncos back in the day. And for those of you who are aware of this show previously, who've checked us out previously, you know this about me. For those of you checking this out for the first time, you don't. And you're hearing about this along with Vance for the first time because I just alluded to this briefly off air. But I am, of course, based on America's North Coast. A lifelong Cleveland Browns fan. So if you would have told, if you would have told little Ricky back in the day, you will be interviewing one of the Three Amigos. Perhaps I can finally get some closure on this, Vance, today. Perhaps I can put some childhood memories at rest here, but great to have you on the program. This will be very interesting. How are you doing today, sir?
Brother, I'm fantastic, and I really am honored to be on your show. Thank you so much for inviting me. I love your show. And we will be able to put things to bed because I want to figure out and find out why the Cleveland Brown fans back in the day when we were beating those guys up in Testaverde and Minifield and those guys had the fire hydrants painted with our football numbers on, and everyone was walking their dogs by it and taking a you-know-what on it.
That was going on back in the day. That certainly was. I will ask you this. I mean, and this is I think a perfectly legitimate question to ask from a football historian point of view. But at least in 86, 87 there with the drive, I guess you could look at some of the other ones subsequently. I'm sure you, in being intellectually honest, would have to admit, if Don Rogers is still alive, at the very least, that drive is certainly more difficult to come by, and maybe some of the other things here. That's one of the big what-ifs in this town. I mean, it's a human tragedy to be sure, but boy, for what that guy was able to do on the field, very Ronnie Lott-esque. I got to say, that's one of the big what-ifs around here.
It sure is. In fact, to this day, and it's been a number, 30 years? It's been so long, and I've never even forgotten the fact that a miracle was pulled off in that stadium. And I would imagine people for generations there in Cleveland are just never going to forget, the letdown that happened when that great John Elway took us down the field, and somehow by a miracle, like I mentioned, we scored, to tie the ball game, and we still had to come back and win it. So it was something that probably will never happen in the history of the league again, especially going into an AFC championship game with 99.5 yards to go and not a lot of time on the clock. So I remember like it was yesterday. In fact, I talk about it almost daily when I talk about my journey in life now and how sometimes you find yourself where no one believes you're going to pull something out, but somehow, some way you figure out how to get out of it. And that's exactly what the Broncos did. And I was able to attest to it because I was on the field the whole time during those two comebacks.
Yeah, that's a very tangible representation of that, to be sure. And I got to say that, this is a thing that only happens in Cleveland. Nobody outside of Cleveland, strangely enough, ever notices this. We always put game-winning field goal with Rich Karlis. We always put that in air quotes because everyone around here will say, if you look at it, did it actually go over the goalpost? Did it not? I mean, there are people around here, and I got to say, myself included, they're like, maybe the NFL should have looked at that one.
I'll tell you what, because Rich Karlis was one of the worst field goal kickers in the history of the game, and that's the reason why we always wanted to be as close as possible, because he was going to put a hook in there, and so you never know by the way that ball was curving, almost like a slice shot or a big hook on the drive when you're hitting a golf ball, whether or not that thing really ended up inside the goalpost. It doesn't really matter to me now. But I guarantee if I was on the other side of the field, I'd be screaming to this day that there's no way that it went inside the goal.
Well, I got to tell you, it's only in recent years I've been able to bring myself to pull that up on YouTube and watch it. And it's interesting that at the time, nobody questioned it. It was like, oh, okay, it went in, whatever. But then, like, subsequently in Cleveland, it was like, maybe they should have taken a look at that one. So,
only in Cleveland, brother. That's right.
That's right. Nobody ever notices that outside of here.
In fact, I don't know what the worst call was, Johnny Manziel or that field goal, that made or missed field goal.
Well, both had negative long-term repercussions on this team. So, yeah, I think it's neck and neck, Vance. And I got to say, again, I in my research for this here, I had not realized who among the three of you, of course you, Mark Jackson, Ricky Nattiel, subsequently found out it was you who had come up with the term the Three Amigos and how that came to be, and subsequently borrowing it from the movie and using it there. And this is one of these things that, again, kind of from a historian's perspective, I look at this and I kind of think to myself, and I wonder if this is anything that's ever really kind of dawned on you, that it happened at right about a point in time in the game when the game was changing. You got Jerry Glanville down in Houston with the Chuck and Duck, multiple wide receiver sets. It's not necessarily that anything you were doing in Denver schematically was that revolutionary, but in terms of how it taught us to think of wide receivers beyond the X and the Z guy, I don't think there'd ever been a time previous to that when more than two wide receivers were really kind of, for lack of a better term, marketed together. And then all of a sudden you got the Three Amigos. Has that ever really kind of occurred to you that it came at that pivotal time in football history?
Honestly, I've never thought about it in those terms, and so thank you for making the pointed point that it had never happened before that, and I think only since then, now, people look at a three wide receiver set as something that is equal to what used to be two great wide receivers on the team. And ironically, because we had three great receivers on the team, and myself, Mark, and Ricky were not getting along at the time, that I thought of a way to force us to have to be out there with one quarterback, with knowing we had a running attack game plan because of our coach, who Dan Reeves, was never wanting to throw the ball until the end of the game, that we had to force ourselves to get along. Because even Mark Jackson and I, being roommates, weren't talking at the time when I came up with the Three Amigos. But it was something that has gone down in history to outlive us almost. And even today, everyone's always like, who was that third amigo? And I love rubbing it in Ricky Nattiel's face. I think I get to go back and show him how much I didn't like him when he first got drafted.
Well, and that's interesting. I mean, draw upon that a little more, if you would, in terms of, I assume, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I assume where you're coming from on that is there's three of you guys and there's only one ball. Was it the competition to get the football?
That's right, brother. We had one quarterback and we had one football, and we didn't have a great passing attack because Dan Reeves loved to have the ball on the ground. But the reason why it started was Mark and I were roommates and we were best friends. Ricky Nattiel, all of a sudden, there's a newspaper article that the Broncos are drafting a wide receiver who was one of the fast receivers coming out in the draft. And so I didn't like the fact that he was coming in the draft a pick higher than me, and they bragged that he was faster than me in the 40. So I went out, and after they gave me his time, they showed it in the newspaper. I went out and called all the press out, and I ran the 40-yard dash faster than him in tennis shoes because I wanted to prove to him that I was still the fastest. So Mark Jackson and Ricky Nattiel become friends, and Mark's my roommate and best friend. So I decided I didn't like Mark anymore. Now Mark, Ricky, and are friends, and then all of a sudden Mark's not starting, Ricky's starting, so now they're not friends. So now here are three of us not even talking to each other, so there's no communication in the huddle at all. And one night I'm watching the Three Amigos, Martin Short and Martin Lawrence and Chevy Chase, and I walked into Mark Jackson's room and told him, listen, I got a great idea that's going to force us all to get along. And he looked at me and said, there's no way they're going to think three black guys can be the Three Amigos. I said, I'm going to blame it on John Elway. Watch. So the rest was history, man.
It is one of those striking things that as the Three Amigos were coming together and that, in terms of your career production, your career statistics, the peak time for the Broncos ultimately there in the late 80s was also the peak time of production for you, of course, climaxing with that 1,095-yard season in 1989. So it's really kind of interesting just how integral to the team that you were, that your best years came when the Broncos were on that high.
Yeah, it was, and I really was blessed, brother, to just really be competitive at that time in my career, especially. and knowing that I had to go out there and just take one day at a time, the same way in my sobriety, that I had to show up every day to do the best I could to make sure I'm making the team. And so it's kind of ironic that it fits my life and my lifestyle now, that being that athlete who showed up to make the big plays, I'm having to do it now in my life for life.
Well, very good foreshadowing there, Vance, because I wanted to get into that. You know, that you were able to, through your career, basically sort of surmount those things, at least at the time, that were bringing you down. But then subsequently, post-football, I know that was a very difficult period of time through you. And then up through a good chunk of the first decade of the 2000s, ultimately trying to get to sobriety was just too big of a challenge at the time. But subsequently, fortunately, you made it, and I know this website here, VanceInspires.com, has got a ton of great stuff about your story, but break it down for us a little bit as far as what it took for you to ultimately get to that point in your life when you could get the help you needed.
I will, brother. Thanks for telling people about my website, and I sure hope they go to VanceInspires.com because it shows I'm very transparent about my life, so I really appreciate that shout-out. Now, you know, my addiction started during my career, but I was lucky enough to think that I had control over it because for some reason when I drank alcohol during my career, which the first time I had a drink was when I was 23 years old and dropped the punt against the San Francisco 49ers and thought I was going to get cut. And at that moment in my life, I decided to give up a little bit. I drank alcohol. I loved it so much that I started smoking marijuana and I started taking painkillers as well. And what I noticed was I played football reckless and I was awesome and I was making big catches. So then I started to see not what I thought was an addiction, but something that enhanced my career. And then I started getting involved in relationships, and unfortunately I became like my father, and I also became abusive in my relationships. And because of that, and going on to an Oprah Winfrey show and talking about domestic violence, I then, to navigate a relationship, whenever things didn't go well in the relationship, I just get a divorce. So instead of working things out like a man is supposed to, like the Christian Bible calls us to be, I kind of just decided to leave someone. And as time went on, I would get divorce after divorce, have child after child, getting issues with cops, be pulled over driving 140 miles an hour on a motorcycle or in the car, getting crashes while I was high, going to the game, intoxicated, and using pills somehow to be brave on the field, that people didn't see behind the scenes what was really happening because I was playing at such a high level. And I also thought at the time I was a great Christian man because for some reason I had all this God-given ability to go out and just really play football and be one of the favorites out there in the field. And I was also that guy pointing up at the sky when I made a touchdown, giving all the credit to the Most High God. But what God was I really believing after 10 years and a couple failed suicide attempts? I was worshiping myself, and I couldn't find fulfillment in the fame and fortune that I was, what I thought was blessed to have. It was the most lost time in my life. And I'm glad now to be transparent about it and be able to share that even if you think that you don't have a problem in using drugs or alcohol or prescription pills, you may, but you don't recognize it because you're still performing or able to wake up every morning and go to work and still bring money home to take care of the bills. It doesn't mean that you're okay. And that introduces mental health issues. Now, growing up around and in domestic violence, there are a lot of underlying issues that I didn't know that eventually would catch up with me because I didn't have tools as a young child to navigate life once I became an adult that was supposed to be responsible and take care of things the way a man is supposed to be when he gets of age and he finds a wife and he understands that he has to raise children and he can bear all things that world of life puts on him. I wasn't that guy. So at the end of my career, 10 years, 3 Super Bowls, a crazy life, and you don't have enough time on your show, brother, for me to share all the hell and the trauma that I went through during my career. But like I said, having those failed suicide attempts and getting in so much trouble with the law, but never being exposed to the press except for my domestic issues, that even after my career, when the lights went out, that's when my identity went away. And once my identity was gone, I had no other way to cope with life at all except for do the same things that I did during my career, except more often. So I took pills and alcohol to wake up in the morning. I took pills and alcohol to navigate through the day. I took pills and alcohol to go to sleep at night. And I also got married several more times. And I'll be honest with you, man, being married as many times as I was, 7 times during and after my career, with these failed relationships and not being in my children's lives, I literally was destroying everything around me. my oldest children started to try to spend more time with me. And my oldest son came over to visit me on the western slope of Colorado, where I started my own restaurant called Vance Johnson's Outlaw Ribs. Well, when my son got there, we started spending time together, and he ended up blowing the engine out of his car and trying to reach his father. I'm sure I was using or chasing women. He couldn't reach me, and he ended up taking his motorcycle across the mountain, and he got killed. And when my son got killed, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. And it was because of me. It was my fault that my son died. And so I started to drink and use even more, brother, for the next 2 years, where I was not any good for anything and any reason. I blamed my mother and father for my life, the tragedies, why everything turned out the way it is, because I saw my dad beating on my mother as a child, and my mother staying with a man for years who was destroying his family and destroying his children's future because we didn't know how to navigate life. And for the next 2 years, I used so much that I used myself into a coma. I was on my deathbed, and my sister came over to say her goodbye. She took a deathbed picture of me. I wish I could show it on the radio show. The pastor came from the church and prayed over me. They wouldn't tell the fans because they didn't want people to know that Vance Johnson was, moments away from dying. And only by the grace of God, when I woke up, I started to wonder why my life ended up the way it was, and then I knew that there was something that had to be done. You know, after leaving the hospital in that 26-day coma and staying at my parents' house, I actually started to drink again, and eventually the NFL and my then seventh ex reached out to the NFL and told them that I was killing myself. And I got contacted by a former Tampa Bay Buccaneer who had been clean for about 5 years by the name of Randy Grimes. I lied for him for 2 or 3 months. I found myself getting even drunker and driving through the canyon there on the western slope of Colorado and crying out to this God that I saw my mom praying to. And I literally heard that he wanted me to go get a loan and get help. And I had to leave my environment to do it. So I reached out to Randy Grimes, and I called the NFL, and by this time I was $1 million in debt, and the NFL offered to pay for my treatment. I got on the airplane, and I took my Bible, and all I did was listen to the underlying issues and listen to the stories that the guys that were in treatment were going through. I shared my story, and I started to notice that there were some parallels. And then I realized the whole reason why I played in the NFL, the whole reason why I went to 3 Super Bowls, the whole reason why I had a near-death experience, and the whole reason why I lost my son, is so I could be a part of the beginning of breaking stigma. Because I didn't want to be a drug addict or alcoholic when I grew up, but it's what I became. And so I want to be that voice to the country to let people know that there's a way out of this hell if you want a way out of it. And so follow me. I call myself the light, like a lighthouse, man, sitting there on the beach, and people are swimming in the ocean drowning. And if they come towards me, I can show them a way out of it. And I have to give all praise to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ because I am a Christian. I'm not trying to preach because there's plenty of ways to get sober, but mine has to do with salvation. And that's the reason why I am who I am today, and I travel around the country sharing. We can go on, but that's kind of the gist of the story, my friend.
Well, I applaud your specific message there as one myself, albeit of the Roman Catholic variety, but I certainly applaud that part of your message as well as everything else. And along those lines, I want to ask you, because again, this is just a personal preference on my part. I tend not to like the term religious faith because I feel like it's used derisively a lot of times. I prefer awareness, religious or spiritual awareness, which you clearly have. And I'm wondering how fundamental this is to you, and I'm guessing that it's a big part of what you're talking about here, but in your ability to relate the story, because obviously whether one goes through an AA 12-step program or whatever it is, obviously coming to grips and dealing with accountability for what has happened to other people, in this case the domestic issues, not getting to see your kids as much, whatever, that's got to be something I would think that would be pretty crippling. And yet you, as you were relating it here, you were able to get through the story. You've come to grips with this. Is it fair to say that the religious awareness and everything and that being centered in your life, that has so much to do with you being able to get through this and to be able to not be crippled by guilt?
Absolutely, man. I'm very transparent about this. I've got friends who are Sikh. I've got friends who are Muslim. I've got friends who don't believe in, the religion or God or Christ like I do. I've got friends who are from India who have lots of gods. And if you choose a path after you've decided that you don't want to be dirty in this addiction anymore and you know that you have no power against it, no matter what the path you take, if you choose you don't want to be that person anymore, I believe that people could sustain sobriety. Mine, however, because of where I was at in my life and knowing who I really am in Christ now especially, if it weren't for me reaching out to this God that I believe in as a child and knowing that the Spirit of God can be in me and turning myself over to Jesus Christ, who I have, I'm walking like him now, and I will never deny him. And because of that, I have no need, no desire, nor will I ever use drugs or drink alcohol again, because the evidence of my guilt is my past, and I'm never going there again. And now all I want to do is be that light so I can show people a way out and tell them I don't care what path you... Brother, okay, so I do interventions with Jewish people in New York City. They think Jesus Christ is a lie, but they still ask me to come save their family members from this addiction. I don't go there to necessarily try to preach to them because that's not going to work. I go tell them, you want to be sober? Let me show you a way out of it. Let's go get you help so you can deal with some underlying issues so you can find your path, your journey to stay sober for a lifetime. Because even my Bible tells me not to stick Jesus down people's throats. My Bible says, why die before your time? So I just want to save lives, man. That's all I care about. Can you hear the passion?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you on that. I don't proselytize either because I feel like it's counterproductive. And you know, that's the last thing you ever want to be is counterproductive. People will come to things in their own way and in their own time. And if you can have something to do to nudge somebody a certain way, if there's an opening, that's one thing. But yeah, I think you're smart with the approach of not shoving it down anybody's throats because that's actively counterproductive, and obviously that's the last thing you want to be as you're doing this. But again, a wonderful message, and I certainly hope that again people can your hub for this at vanceinspires.com has got everything people need as far as learning about your story, booking you as a motivational speaker, just getting in contact, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I think it's incredibly worthwhile and so great what you are doing to help people. But while having
Thank you,
it really is awesome, Vance. I applaud you so much.
I hope people go to my Facebook page too, because that's kind of where I live my life at. I manage it myself right now, and when people reach out to me for help to get them into treatment, I'm always responding. I may have someone, if I'm on the airplane or something, make sure they reach out to them and give them some information that they need. So follow me. I'm transparent. I show my life, whether it's on Vance Johnson Facebook or my website, Vance Inspires. We'll get you the help that you need. I'm an outreach spokesperson for Futures Recovery Healthcare, which is an inpatient facility down in West Palm Beach, Florida. An amazing family, an amazing opportunity for people, especially athletes who are dealing with chronic pain, people dealing with underlying issues to take a look at. But my goal is to get people into treatment. I work for one facility, but I get people into treatment all over the country.
Yeah, and that's, again, very worthwhile work that you are doing. I applaud it very strongly. I hope people check it out. I would be derelict if I didn't ask you here on the show, as a former NFL great, thoughts on present day in the NFL. Of course, your old QB in Denver, John Elway, trying to reboot here with Case Keenum this year at quarterback. Certainly that defense, really, with just a little bit of help from that offense, that defense will be able to carry him a long way. An interesting time in the division. You got Chucky coming back to Oakland. You got Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, who early on looks like he's the real deal. The Chargers are a very formidable team if they can ever just put it all together. That's sort of been their story of the last couple of years. So I would say probably the toughest division in the AFC to try to make your mark in. But what are your thoughts on how the Broncos look, and any other thoughts you have about the NFL today?
Well, brother, I think you spelled it out quite honestly, because I'll tell you, the AFC looks like the AFC of old back in the mid-'80s, where the Chargers could always be in there. The Raiders, because they always got the talent. Now they got Chucky, who's a good friend of mine, who I saw just a few weeks ago there in Florida before he got that $100 million contract. And now you got the Kansas City Chiefs that they're always going to show up to every game. And the AFC West has always been a great division. The Broncos, I love the fact that we always will be on the top of it in my eyes, because now we have that John Elway there. We got Vance Johnson, good friend of mine. And believe it or not, Gary Kubiak is still behind the scenes. And I think the team is put together right now where the offense is good enough to start having confidence to put points on the board. We got great receivers. The quarterback situation, that's going to show out somewhere in mid-season. We'll show where that's going to be. As far as the rest of the league right now, I think it's pretty even all over across the board. I'm kind of pulling for my Eagles this year because I'm the one that called their victory last year. 3 days before the game, I called exactly what was going to happen. And as far as the rest of the league, I think it's for the first time in history, you don't know who's going to end up going to the championship, and you don't even know who's going to go to the playoffs right now. So we just have to keep our eye out for early in the season, all these new coaches, and see who starts to take an edge to the front right away.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of parity in a lot of places, and that's what keeps it interesting. The league has been pushing for, that 8-8 on any given Sunday thing. That's always been the league's ultimate dream for a long time from a marketing perspective, and it does help keep people interested in it. But I have to say, again, what a total pleasure it's been to have you on the show and get to hear about your story, Vance. I think, again, a really incredible one, a way to follow up on your career in terms of, again, this second act in your life that's obviously the most important one because it's your chance to help people and really be such a positive force and hopefully helping people to avoid some of the depths that you were able to go through it during that period of time. A real pleasure to have you on, Vance Johnson. I hope you're not a stranger. I'd love to have you back on to talk about things subsequently.
I'd love to be, and I'll leave one more thing with your listeners. Somebody's sobriety has their name on it, and I want them to think about that. There's somebody out there who's suffering, who because of them, they're going to reach and get the help that they need, and they're going to save a life. Someone's sobriety has their name on it. Thank you so much, man. Love your show.
Thank you, Vance. I really appreciate having you on. Thank you, everybody, for checking us out for FDH Lounge mini episode number 1032.
As we bring the show to a close, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to NBC, CBS, ABC, Fox, all Clear Channel affiliates, TNT, TBS, USA, UPN, Deadspin.com, YouTube.com, YTMND.com, MySpace.com, various blogs, Fox News, CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, IamBoard.com, Billboard.com, Google.com, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN News, ESPN Classic, NBA TV, NFL Network, Sports Time Ohio, Athlon Magazine, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, The Boomerang Channel, QVC, BET, The Spice Channel, Steno Notebooks, Manwich, Papermate Office Supplies, Waitresses, Strippers, Bartenders, Garbage Men, Janitors, Microwave Popcorn, the writers of The Office, Scrubs, Entourage, My Name is Earl, Oz, Metalocalypse and the Boondocks, Aquafina, and The Periodic Table of Elements.